And what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. This week's MLS news has been a doozy, and we are going to do our thing and cover it all for you. First and foremost, MLS has dropped roster rule changes to take place in the summer transfer window of this season. It's happening, people. We're going to go through them one by one, explain what they mean, how they're going to impact the teams going forward, and what it could mean for the league as a whole going forward. Then, as this MLS season continues to go on, Mineesota United Star midfielder Emanuel Reynoso went MIA again. Is it time to just move on from the Argentine? We'll discuss it. And finally, as MLS bows out of Champions League again, specifically their big team in Inter Miami, leaving just the Columbus Crew to represent us, some are saying that the general interest of the league decreases when we aren't winning international competitions. We're going to dive into that statement a little bit in greater depth and detail, determine its validity. It's got good arguments on both sides, so we're gonna try and see it both ways and have that conversation. I'm Andrew. Connor's that way, I think.
I'm
And
here somewhere.
yeah, you're over there somewhere. And up next, we're going to talk about this week's MLS news. Connor, I'm not even going to give you a break for this one because I am going to introduce you
Why
and say
not? I
hello.
want to hear the break.
Because I
Give
want
me
to
the
say
pause.
hello because it's been so long since we've chatted.
It hasn't been that long.
It's been too long.
I wanted you to have the break because I want to stand up. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna stand up.
Oh my goodness, great! This is good. So now that
Look,
I
you can
edit,
show. I could show my shirt. I
I
got my
like
Gio
that.
Reyna
That's a nice
shirt.
shirt. So now when I edit, I can see you go.
Yeah, I could go all over the place, just
Yeah.
swinging back and forth.
Well, and it's funny, right? In our most recent fun game Friday, all I told them was, "Hey, all you need to do is stay as still as possible because when we do this, the screen gets very, very tiny, and when you move, it's very hard to find you." And what does he do? All over the screen, all over the place.
I'm purposely trying to make it hard to find me. I'm like a game of Where's Waldo.
And this is why you ask, "Oh man, why don't you ever introduce me?" Because you make my life hard, and I don't like
That's how I like it.
you. Oh man, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good. I'm good.
Good, man. It's good
Excited
to
to
be
talk
back.
roster rules.
Yeah, finally, right? Like it's been teased for a while, like since beginning of the season, before the beginning of the season. And now we're at a point where we can actually talk about what's happening. And you know what? Last week we saved the biggest news piece or the biggest talking point of the episode for last. So I think we reverse it this time. We start off with the big one. What do you think? You all right with that?
Yeah, I'm good
But
with it.
but before we do any of that, of course, it's Scarf of the Week time. So I gotta see what you're rocking.
I'm going on a repeat. I apologize, but going to give some love to the team that is the only one left representing us in CCC, and that would be the Columbus Crew. So all MLS fans, even the Cincinnati ones, are going to have to put on their Columbus Crew hat for a little bit in the hopes that they can take us to the finish line.
Oh, look at that. Close enough. So I don't have a Mineesota scarf and I wasn't going to do the crew things. I knew you were going to do the crew thing. So I was like, you know what? Let me find something that's close to Minnesota. And in the time that it takes to go from the bottom of England to the top, separates the scarf I have from Minnesota. And that is our friends from the flock, Forward Madison. What an elite club. Always one of my favorites. I love the colors. I love the Mingo. We're always going full Mingo. You know how we do.
It's a great club and a great scarf, but what an awful reasoning to have the scarf on for this episode. Makes no sense whatsoever.
Hey, it's the closest one I've got on the wall because I was going to
Just
be like,
get the Columbus scarf out. Stop trying to be different.
no, I'm unique and fun. See, because here's the thing: you have like 6 scarves, and you're like, oh, how am I going to make this work today? Me, I've got a wall full of them, 70 deep, and I got to figure out how I can get them all involved. So here we are.
What you have is a problem, not not a
Um,
scarf collection.
yeah. So here's what we do. That's called an opinion, and it's right.
And it's a good one.
I need more. Yeah, we did the big one last time, so let's do the big one first this time. MLS Board of Governors have met this week to discuss and ultimately pass spending reform on their roster rules. So this includes, and we'll dive into it a little bit deeper here, the already rumored decoupling of U22 and DP slots, an increase in the number of buyouts per season, and an increase in convertible GAM from your transfer revenue. So for the non-MLS savvy, let's dive into what this means. And we'll start with U22 and DP slots. That was the first one that came up, right? We did chat about this a few episodes ago, talking about how the designated player and the U22 slots worked together and why decoupling them matters. So we won't go too deep into that, but essentially now you don't need to meet certain criteria to have more of these high level, low impact budget players on your roster, right? So what's really interesting is that there is actually an incentive in this rule now to shift from all DPs to more U22 players if you so choose. So instead of having 3 DPs and 3 U22s like is allowed at the time, like at the current time, you can now actually switch to a 4th U22 slot and also earn an extra $2 million in GAM to spread across your roster for buy downs, mid level spending, all that good stuff, right? So it also means that teams who have 2 DPs this season, by the time this rule goes into effect, are actually going to also get $1 million of GAM heading into for the rest of this season because of the halfway implementation of this rule, which means we can start seeing these roster changes very, very soon. So I want to throw it over to you first and ask your thoughts on this specific rule change.
I mean, I know the instant reaction is going to be, oh, this is extremely underwhelming. And I know that for a fact because I can see Paul Tenorio's tweet and I can see the comments underneath it. And the top comment, of course, is this is seriously underwhelming. And that's the exact reaction I would expect from people looking at this. And honestly, I would be lying if I said that there wasn't a part of me that felt that a little bit when I first saw it. But I think Paul makes a good point when he's responding back and he's saying that, they're not just going to rip the band-aid off mid-season on changes like these. And if they're going to make these bigger, larger changes, it's going to be in the winter off season before the new season starts, which makes a lot of sense to me. And when you put that into perspective, I think these changes are really good for midseason. I think it's working towards boosting areas of concern with the salary cap that we have talked about, which is mainly the depth. It's something that everybody's been talking about. I saw a Tata Martino quote that was talking about it with CCL or CCC, wherever you want to call it. And I think having that max 3 million in GAM for transfer revenue, or the extra 2 million in GAM for having the 2 DPs, 4 U22s, is going to be huge for teams to be able to build up that depth and finally have some more money to build a stronger team in total and compete in all these competitions. So I'm fully on board with this. I think it's great. I don't know if did you cover the buyouts already, or we didn't get to that part yet?
We're going to that next. If you
all right, I won't talk about that one yet.
You listen one by one. I know you never listen to anything I say, but
I know I jumped the gun on the GAM one too, but I got too excited. What can I say?
this is why we can't have nice things. This is why we're only number 5 on MLS podcast list and not number 1.
This is why we still have roster restrictions.
You know what though? If we did put pro rel in, all of this would go away.
All right, that's it.
Here we go. Now
don't do that. Don't do that.
No, I agree. I really like this, right? And we spoke about it last time, giving owners the ability to invest in better players with more on-field impact, with less budget impact, will inevitably increase the quality of the team, the play, the league, all of it, right? We know that's going to happen. But my real favorite part about this is that they've actually provided an option of how you want to implement this system in your team, right? So Jim Curtin was asked about this in a press conference, and he talked about how these new rules are going to be used differently between clubs. And to me, it makes it all the more exciting, right? You're going to have the Miamis, the LAs, the people who are going to spend big boy money on all these stars and DPs, and they'll get to have their U22s as well. That's great, but you also are now allowing teams like RBNY, Philly, Dallas, who usually don't use all 3 of their DP slots anyway, most of the time, where now they can not only still invest in the higher level young players that they like to, that's their system, their pathway. But now they're also getting an increase in GAM for mid-level spending or buying down players or what have you to just continue to increase the middle bulk of their roster, which again is 2 different ways to build your team. And we have that a little bit now, but I think now you see it take it another step, right? Now you're going to have so many different types of teams in the league now, which I'm really excited to see, because it can get a little dull when you've got 3 designated players and then the rest of it is homegrowns or some mid-level guys. And I think it's really, really nice to see the fact that they are giving different pathways to team building so that you have different types of team in the league. I think that's really exciting. I I don't want to say it too quickly, but I do think that we're getting close to just another MLS era. I don't think we've technically even gotten into 4.0 yet. I think this is kind of the step into 4.0, but you're getting to 5.0 even quicker, right? Where you're allowing teams now more variation in the way that they build their teams, more depth in the league in terms of quality and variability and style of play and coaching mechanism. Like it gives so much more flexibility versus, I mean, not to spoil Wednesday's episode, but I was rewatching a game from 2007 for our history episode on Wednesday, and it was one big name player on either side with like one or two solid supporting players, and the rest of them were like, "I'm going to kick this as far as I can and hope." And that was the way the league played. So to continue to build and allow different pathways to explore and grow is going to be really really exciting for me.
Yeah, no, I think the flexibility thing is something I didn't even think about, but that's a great point. I mean, I think that's one of the I think it's a very overlooked aspect of the situation where you'd have no salary cap, where you could build your roster however you want. You could spend your money however you want. If you want to be a team like Southampton who builds up talent and sells it on, you can do that. If you want to be a Man City and spend all your money and take risks on big time players, then you could do that. And having this flexibility is just another step towards that direction. And I think as much as I'd still like to see them do even more, especially in the depth department, I would really like to see teams be able to really build deeper rosters so that we can be competitive in these tournaments. And maybe next year we can finally see a little bit of progress with changes like these. But I think that'll be like the biggest sign that we're moving in that 4.0 direction that you were talking about, is once we start consistently competing in these other tournaments, these Champions League tournaments, which I know we'll talk a little bit more about later.
I think the other side of that too, right, is it's giving clubs the ability to pick how they build while also maintaining a level of control parity and I'll use the term safety net, right? Like it is Man City esque, right? Oh, you can go buy three players who are out there, but you're not letting them buy 15 players at 55 mil each, and now it's like, okay, well, I have no money left. Team's gone, right? This is a controlled step, which is par for the MLS course, right? We're controlled. We're going to make these changes. We're going to make sure that it's not going to put anything that we've done in jeopardy, which I do think we're closer to the point of never having to worry about that than always having to worry about that. While I don't believe we're completely past it, I do think we've gone to another level of better, right? But yeah, having that level of control is really good. And now, again, it allows them to make other changes, such as what you were alluding to before, Mr. Jump the Gun, in increased buyouts from 1 to 2 buyouts per season. Now, again, this is pretty simple, right? If you have a player on your team that's under contract for 3 years and he's not, providing the impact for what your salary hit is for him, you're able to pay that player, terminate the contract, instantly get budget flexibility, roster flexibility, and find a new way to fix that, right? Instead of having to sit there with your hands behind your back and say, okay, we're going to have to, eat it for the next 3 years and then maybe hopefully use the buyout. This year they let it buy out during the season, where last year it had to be at the end of the season. So you had to wait a whole season to get rid of somebody. Now you're allowed to do it with two different people, which again is it just gives more flexibility and more cap space in the immediate time instead of, oh, we're not going to let you do it until the end of the season. Now you're going to have to live with it, right? So your thoughts on that? Because I know you really wanted to talk about
it. No, I think it's a great move because it's rewarding the teams that are willing to take a risk. If you're willing to take a risk and bring someone in on the hopes that there's a high ceiling there, but maybe it didn't work out, maybe they got a bunch of injuries, they just haven't been able to get on the field or be on the field consistently, or their play isn't consistent. Now, like you said, you're not stuck with them for potentially years until the contract runs out, or even having to wait an extra year just to be able to buy them out again. You can now more, it's encouraging teams to take that risk more often because you have a way to get out of it much easier. So I'm on board with it. I think hopefully that means that teams are willing to take risks on more players, whether that be younger players. I imagine this probably is going to tend to be more on the older player side. I don't think they're necessarily going to be buying out younger players. I think there's probably still value to be had or to be sold, even if younger players aren't working out. We saw it with Barco, That was someone that didn't exactly click here, but they still made good money back on him. Same with South American Player of the Year, PT Martinez. Um,
So
but
so
yeah,
this is just an Atlanta United rule. Every time they swing and miss on a young player, it's
yeah,
help them out.
yeah. Why not? I mean, it's exciting. I mean, that's what we want. We want teams to at least take the risk as opposed to just not do anything at all, like previous years Colorado's have been.
I
Maybe.
knew MLS was rigged. I knew that they're doing it just for their big teams. This is ridiculous boycott.
Are you predicting the comments right now,
Maybe.
or are you the comments?
I like that idea though. I didn't really think about that in terms of the risk, right? Because you're right. If you only get, there was a lot of lack of wiggle room, I guess is the way. Well, like you either get it right or you live with the consequences, and that naturally will hold you back from making these sorts of moves and decisions, right? But I do think this is actually going to be equally impactful in the short term as some of the others will. You count all the times there are players who have to stick around. Jairo Torres was a good example. How long they stick around with Jairo Torres before they were like, okay, we need to use this buyout on him, right? I understand that originally this was done so that you limit the amount of players that owners who had no idea what we were doing. We've talked about that before, right? In the past, where these roster rules were put in place because the owners who were in charge of them were football people and they just didn't know anything about soccer. They just had money and let
The
other people
Chivas example, buying players off FIFA.
yeah, literally, right? So this was to prevent them from being like, oh, we're going to take risks on players and they don't, the American football way, or heck, look at the Premier League, manager way. We'll pick let's think of a really crap team, Chelsea. So we'll pick Chelsea, where they get a manager for like 6 months, and if he doesn't bring them to the top of the table, which is mathematically impossible most of the time, he's out. And then you're paying him. I think I saw something. You're paying like $400 million to past managers over the last 10 years or something like that. I gotta quote that, but that it prevents that, right? So there's no buying and cutting and buying and cutting and buying and cutting, which again provides instability and the ability that your team may fold, right? That's what that was for. But now that we're in this new age of advanced ownership and people who understand what they're doing and good front offices, like we've spoken about, they've earned the trust to make these sorts of decisions. I think we've gotten to a point where maybe they haven't earned a complete, as you mentioned, rip off the band-aid and go spend whatever you want, but they've earned the ability to say, hey, we took a risk, it didn't work out, let's do it, let's give me a second buyout so I can cut my losses and fix it the next time, right? I think they've earned that much. And really the thing for me is I think this is actually going to end up being something used way more in the two buyouts, way more in the short term than the long term, right? Because they've been so handicapped over the last couple of years, they've probably got a list of players that are like, okay, we can probably cut these two players right now, save X amount on cap, and then get these players we know will fit our system better. Long term, post 2026, where we've got a more stable idea of what our team wants to be and how it's going to look. I think this is really just something that is a fail safe if something goes wrong. I think it's great for the short term. It allows you to cut the dead weight and become more competitive heading into 2026 and wherever you may be. But as we get further in and we keep making better and better decisions, I don't think it's something that's needed as much, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, a team that would benefit from that a lot, I think, is someone like Portland would have benefited from that. Like they were stuck with Yimi Chara and Niezgoda, who were constantly injured, not on the field, couldn't get consistent game time, couldn't get consistent results by the end. And a double buyout there could have freed up two more designated player spots for them, which would have been massive. I mean, that's a huge push they could make towards the end of the season if they were able to buy them out before the summer transfer window and add two more players, make that push, make the playoffs, and then who knows what can happen from there.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing, right? We're at a point now where we don't need to worry about this. Oh man, it's just the way that we're going to deal with this buyout, right? Like, oh man, we messed it up and we're gonna cut our losses, right? And then cut our losses again and cut our losses again. Eventually, we run out of the ability to cut our losses, and now we're in trouble, right? So, and again, it's not a we're taking them all away. You can cut whoever you want whenever you want, right? It's still controlled. It's in the right direction, which is great, right? And that's the thing that I love about the way that they do their rule changes is it's always controlled. It's always strategic, always thought about. So I do really like that. But the other thing that I really like, almost a little bit more, not almost, like just a smidge more, conversion of your transfer fee into GAM. At the present moment, it's like 1.2 million of
Oh my,
all your
wait, hold on. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to jump in. The number is so oddly specific. The
I know,
amount.
we
I
probably
have
should
it
have,
up.
yeah.
I have it up. It is 1,215,506. That's what it is. Who decided that? Who was like, yes, it needs to be this number exactly? There's probably some reasoning behind it. I highly doubt it was just like, oh, let's just throw a random number out there.
My guess is it's a percentage of the available GAM done here and that GAM, so my guess is this is a percentage of available GAM that you get at the beginning of the season, right? And that GAM is a percentage of the total allowable spend on the roster, right? Something along those lines. So it gets specific because you're using percentages and then you're rounding up. Like I was shocked not to see like pennies and dimes in there, right? Like that's what I was waiting for. But yes, a very
That would be funny.
specific, yeah, a very specific number, right? Um, but now they've increased it up to 3 million. Now I know you were kind of jumping the gun here, but if you want to expand on that a little bit too.
I personally think this could be the best out of the three in terms of the new rule changes because, and don't quote me on this because GAM and TAM usage is still really confusing to me, and I'm not totally 100% sure on it because so I originally thought GAM was for making like intra-league moves, like being able to send GAM to buy like international spots, players, draft picks, whatever. And I thought TAM was what you could use to buy down salary cap impacts. But then in the article, it's talking about GAM being able to buy down salary cap impacts. So I don't know anymore. And I don't really care to figure it out at this point. But I'm just going to assume GAM could be used to build your roster out a little bit more. And so essentially tripling the amount of money that you can have in GAM, I think is amazing for working towards teams getting more depth. Having that ability to go have ambitious owners who can see, okay, we have all this GAM. Let's go spend it within the league and go find players that are really successful that can build out the depth without taking up a DP or even an international slot or a U22 slot. And now we have this stacked team because we had all this money and all this GAM and all this whatnot because we were able to build up young players and sell them on. Like, someone like a Dallas could benefit from this massively. Like Dallas is huge into building up players, selling them on, being able to collect money from like a Pepe sale and being able to then spend it in the league and rake up all this GAM and being able to build up the roster and build up the depth and be more competitive throughout the season and in multiple competitions. I see nothing but good things out of it. I'm really glad that they did this. It's long overdue. And I hope moves like this one in particular keep coming into the future. Reward the teams that are willing to invest in their youth, build them up, and sell them on for good money. Because right now, those are the guys that are bringing good attention to this league.
So just an update for you on your allocation money, confusion, which
Yes.
is fair. General allocation money reduces cap hit. So non-designated players. So I think the designated player is 600K, give or take. A non-designated player can go all the way down to 67.5 in terms of thousands of dollars, or so 67,500. So if you pay somebody 150,000 and you've got the GAM to do it, you can bring him down to the minimum roster hit with that GAM, which allows you then to be more flexible with other players, right? Designated players who are a 600 whatever hit can be brought down to 150,000. The targeted allocation money is going from designated to non-designated. So if you got somebody who's at the 900,000 and he's getting hit at 60 or 670, right? Let's just say it's a number. If you bring him down to 500, that's targeted. Now targeted is being phased out. It is no longer, it's in the CBA to be phased out. So general allocation money takes over the whole process. So
Good.
that's why,
Confusing.
correct. And that's why I believe that they're starting to do this. And again, that's a belief. I don't have that written in stone or anything. So allow it.
All right, so let me just make sure I have this right. So someone who's has a DP cap impact
mm-hmm.
keeps the DP tag with GAM, but the salary cap impact goes down. Is that what
Correct.
it is?
Correct.
Okay.
Now you can bring it down all the way. Like it doesn't change anything outside of just the way that the budget's calculated in the roster. That's all it is.
Well, I mean, that's still a good thing though,
Oh
because
yeah.
to be honest, like that's still building up the depth out of all the other places. Because even if you can't free up a DP spot and bring in another DP level player.
Mhm.
That cap impact being a lot lower now because you have more GAM to spend allows you to spend more money to keep guys that are less than the DP tag on the team and build that depth. And I think it's a really good addition as well. Even if it's not necessarily just for spending to trade and bring in new players, like it's still being able to reduce those cap impacts will allow teams to spend more to keep talented players in this league so that they're not just moving on and continuously having to rebuild the depth again year after year.
Yeah, and here's the other thing that I took from this, right? And I'm just going to pull up for an example. We know that if you are to sell a player that is a homegrown player out of your academy, you keep all of that money, right? 1.2 million GAM transfer revenue. 1,215,506. If we're gonna be specific about it, right? If we look at somebody like Ricardo Pepi, who got sold, and I'm gonna just do it in euros because I can't be bothered to convert it. We got sold for 16.5 million euros. The comparison for how much of you just made to how much you're allowed to use in a season or convert from that is jaw dropping. This number made sense when our highest outgoing transfer was 5 mil. We're selling players more and more for these double digit figures and for high millions of figures, and we're doing more frequently, as well. As we were continuing, and again, just some other players, right? Miguel Almiron, Gaga Slanina, John Duran, like these players that, generating maybe 10% increase in GAM bit compared to what they've sold for. As the value of these players are continuing to increase, as they clearly are, that number had to go up. And I'm sure it eventually was going to, but I think it's a good thing that they've pushed it ahead because, again, one, you're freeing up cap space, you're freeing up roster flexibility, which is good, but it also sets a tone for what's expected out of this league. And that's more players moving for more money to more teams that are spending dumb money because they can, right? It just simply couldn't, because if we continue to sell people for these double digit figures and we're only allowed to, like, what's the rest of it going into? Okay, you're going into stadium renovations, you're going into youth academy stuff, all great, but again, this was really good when that stuff wasn't common, right? When we were still building up our stadium, we're still building up our infrastructure, our training facilities, our youth development program, all that sort of stuff was really nice. MLS 2.0, 3.0. Now we're at a point where everybody's got it, everybody's using it relatively well, give or take a couple of teams. But now it's like, okay, I've got all this money and it's great to sit on, and we're going to put it in the bank. We're going to save it for a rainy day. And especially if it's an academy player who is, everything's coming back to you. Or if it's not, Miguel Almiron for 20 something and MLS is taking 25% of it, right? Whatever. It just doesn't make sense to have this team be like, okay, you've got, and again, maybe you could put it in the pocket of the owner and say, okay, go buy a DP. But most of these teams have three already. So what are you going to do? You're just sitting on it now. And again, as much as we don't like to talk about like, oh, the owners are only in it for, profits and whatever, that's kind of like incentivizing them to do that. So it's good to give them this opportunity now to reinvest, because the money now just goes straight into your investment pool rather than into your pocket, right?
Yeah, I mean, to your point before, 8 out of the top 10 transfer sales in MLS's history have been since 2020.
Right.
So it's exactly as you, and honestly, the other two were right outside of it, 2018, 2019 season. So every single one of these top moves has been in recent years. Be that because of inflation, be that because of increased talent coming through the youth system, but there is more money coming in, and so more money needs to be allowed for teams to be able to reinvest, and not just in youth academies and stadium buildings. Because I think there's money across the board to do both of those things. And teams will continue to make money, the ones that are putting in the effort to. Like Chicago's and Dallas's and Red Bulls and Phillies are going to continue to sell players and continue to make money. And because of that, they'll have enough money to be able to invest in the stadium still, invest in the youth academies, and then still have leftover where they can then have that advantage in the league because they were willing to bet on their youth academy and invest in there.
Yeah, and here's the thing, right? Like, and people make a very good point when they bring up this gripe, right? Where we've got this $2.5 billion deal, and people were selling players on for all this profit, and we're not allowing the teams to make this change. That's fair, right? That's a fair gripe, and something that I completely understand for the people who are wanting this league to grow faster, stronger, better, right? This is a very good controlled way to do it, because I think everybody was expecting, like, oh, just rip it off, go floor ceiling spending limits, and then from there let them do whatever they want, right? That probably was never going to happen. However, this allows them way more flexibility, and it's a really nice controlled way to say, okay, we're gonna increase what you can now spend, which is great. And again, what this, I believe, is going to do long term, right? And then we'll move on here. Eventually, is going to make this stuff not needed for, again, I had a better word for it, but I couldn't think of it. Not needed. When you get $3 million, and now we're reading through all of these notes, right? Oh, well, GAM can take your DP hit down to 150, and your non DP, you can take your entire team and minimize their rosters down to, everybody's down to 100K, right? And if you're doing that at the same time that your salary spending limit continues to raise, well, now you've got all this free room where you're going to be able to move things around. You're not going to need the GAM or TAM anymore. You're going to be able to just focus on how you're applying your money better, right? So I think this is a good in the moment move, but also expands upon the future to say, we've proven we may not need these anymore, and then go to more of a natural system, if that makes sense. I kind of butchered the words there because I couldn't really think of the right way to describe that, but I hope that got across right.
Yep, I got you. I'm following.
Yeah. Well, I don't care if you're following me. I care if our listeners are following me. Connor, you know what I miss most about going to games in real life?
What's that, Andrew?
Taking home that real ticket stub at the end of the day. Everything's all electronic these days, and we've lost the ability to collect those memories.
I couldn't agree more. I love having the physical keepsakes from games, and I wish they didn't do away with these.
Well, lucky for you, today's sponsor, StubForge, can help you fill that void. StubForge is a custom ticket company that helps you bring memories to life in the form of real, physical, customizable ticket stubs. With 7 different styles to choose from, you can create a custom ticket for any event your heart desires. From events you have attended in the past to dream matchups like RBNY winning this year's MLS Cup.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. Not only can you bring your memories to life, it is also a great way to make unique and fun invitations to parties, weddings, events, and so much more to make them feel like VIPs to the biggest occasions in your life.
These tickets look and feel like the real thing, printed on the same stock Ticketmaster uses and with actual ticket printers, so that you can be sure the quality will be just as good as what you'd get at the gate.
Not to mention how easy it is to design. Just go online to stubforge.com and start creating right away. The amount of customization you can add to these tickets is unreal. From venues, addresses, show and print times, seat location, prices, and so much more. You can make the ticket exactly as you dreamed it would be, all with just a few clicks.
Man, when we take our designated player tour of all the stadiums in the league, we're going to have to get some of these to commemorate each and every match.
100%. If you want to create your own tickets, head over to stubforge.com. That's stubforge.com and start designing today.
But the one thing I'm really following, Connor,
Yeah.
is Mineesota United. Because we're going to move over to our friends in the north, Los Loons, who seem to be missing out on Los monies that they are not paying to their Los Star Emanuel Reynoso. That was nice, right? How cool that.
Something like that.
It was reported on Tuesday, that Loon Star. Sorry, I had to. I think that dude's so funny. I found him the other day. I think he's hilarious. So, Loon Star Emanuel Reynoso skipped out on his green card appointment to become a permanent U.S. resident and went back to Argentina. Once again, as this happened last year, missing all the preseason and 15 games to start that year. No one knows when he'll come back. Well, he's actually back now. I did some research after I wrote this out, and he is back, but he just went MIA. So before I ask you the obvious question, does this put a really bad look on the league? Like, is this a bad reflection on the league as much as it is Reynoso in Minnesota?
Listen, the ones that are looking for reasons to hate on the league are going to use anything they can as fuel, and they will use this as fuel. But for those that are neutral or those that are supporters of the league, I don't think it's a knock on the league. I think it's a player specific situation, maybe a team specific situation, but I don't think it's something that MLS should get knocked for as a league.
I think we're going to disagree here a little bit
How
because
dare you?
you know that I'm not one to walk around like the rest of soccer Twitter is like, oh, MLS is so unserious because of insert stupid dumb take here, right? But I do think this is a bad look just on the league, and here's why, right? Especially when you're trying to quell comments like that. Emmanuel Reynoso at the point of research, and it hasn't been updated since September 15th, so we haven't updated with the new numbers yet. Of the players still in the league since that report was released, he is getting paid $2.15 million a season, 25th most in the league, 25th highest player in the league of 30 teams, 900, give or take. That's more than Ricky Puig. That's more than João Klaus, Lewis Morgan, Golden Boot leader, Dante Van Zier, assist leader. I mean, if we're just talking about stat leaders in 2024. In the last two seasons, he's missed 17 games for random trips back to Argentina. That's at the start of the season. Now, I'm discounting 3 games that he missed this year where he was out with the knee injury suffered during preseason, which, okay. But we're talking about a professional player voluntarily missing games, appointments to get him residency in this country, like things that people are setting up for him just to be back home. He's played 30 minutes against LAFC in their 2-0 win. And I'm not sure if he got hurt there and needed to be, rehabbed or whatever. I didn't find anything like that. But Minnesota dropped a video of him a few days ago where he mentions, I didn't come back because of personal and family reasons. And, it wasn't right. And he was sorry and it'll never happen again and blah, 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 blah. And listen, I am here for treating athletes like humans, right? People have problems, people have issues, they need to be able to take care of them. Don't get me wrong. Like, that's not where I'm going with this. But there's a way to go about doing stuff like this. Asking permission, making very basic comments, right? Circling back to this transparency issue we talked about last week, just basic comments saying, hey, Reynoso is taking a leave of absence. He's got to deal with stuff at home, or he's taking a leave of absence. He's got, mental health things he's dealing with, whatever. But just walking off and at least giving the impression that you're just walking off and going away whenever you want is, to me, something that somebody who is anti-MLS already can jump on and be like, oh man, look at this. The league lets their high-paid players do whatever they want because they know this is a retirement league. It doesn't matter, and blah, 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 right? So I'm not saying that is the what has happened, but I'm saying it's very easy to give that aura, if you will, for what he's doing, right? When Reynoso is skipping team events, it's a bad look on the league because it's not being, publicized. Like, this isn't something we planned for. It looks unprofessional, right? And if he didn't tell his teammates or coaches anything except, hey, I got to leave, I'll see you when I see you. Right now, I'm sitting in the locker room like, this dude's getting paid $2 million a year. I'm on 70K, and I'm here every day busting my butt, and he's just going as he pleases, right? That's going to cause problems in your training room as well. So I do disagree with you there that I think it's not a great look. And I'm not saying it's a great look because it's like they're letting it happen. I'm just saying it's a great look because of the image it portrays. You know what I mean?
I mean, I still don't think it should be at the blame of MLS here. I mean, we're talking about the exception rather than the rule. There are a
Sure.
number of stars in this league who are not doing the same thing. Hani Mukhtar, Luchi Acosta, they're here, they're playing every week. These guys play like 3,000 minutes a season. They're here every week that they can be. They're acting like stars. They're performing like stars. I think the Reynoso situation is an exception. I think it's more so on the player or possibly on the team, depending on what exactly is going on. And I'm all on board for you in terms of treating athletes like humans because they are.
Right.
And if he actually like, has stuff going on at home, then he should be given the time to go deal with what he needs to at home. Or if it's something very serious and he needs to permanently go back home, then he should. But this like limbo back and forth while not being transparent with the team is, like you said, it's a bad look, but I don't think it's a bad look on the league. Maybe it's a bad look on Minnesota. I also feel like that's a bit of a stretch, but I feel like if you're not talking to your team, that's on you. And maybe I'm missing some of the details there, but um, I mean, if you or I just walked away from a job and just didn't say anything to them and just went MIA, that would be a problem. Even if we were getting paid a lot, like that's not something that's just going to get, it's not like, oh, you know, this company A looks bad because employee one has gone MIA.
Sure, and I do think that it's different when you know sports are different, right? Because people are not watching Google and being like, "Oh, Joe Schmo walked away, didn't tell anybody, and now Steve Jobs doesn't know what he's doing." I don't even know if that's the right connection, by the way, but whatever, right? But on the side, right? If MLS came out and was like, "We're encouraging a 2 game suspension," right? Because he left team activities without saying something, or Minnesota even came out and said, "Hey, we're suspending him for X amount," right? Fine, like I think that's great. But because the less they say about it, more they kind of just sweep it under the rug. It feels very MLS 2.0, right? We got these big DP stars in. I mean, even to a degree, like Messi's in this role of people trying to take these shots. And again, a big stretch for a lot of times because he's actually hurt. But people who are like, "Oh, the big stars can just do whatever they want," and that we know that's not true. But when things like this happen, the one-offs, it is tough to shake that sort of thing, right? When Miami is the one bringing in 70, 45-year-olds from Barcelona, while the rest of the league is signing U22s and players that are being sold on for, tens of millions of dollars and all the stuff. The thought is retirement, right? Because that's what the general perception is. Now, you and I and the people who support this league know that's not the case. But when we're trying to shake a generalization, I think is the better word for it, these things make it more difficult. And again, if Minnesota or MLS comes out and says this wasn't acceptable, or this was acceptable and we were anticipating it, we just didn't make a statement out of respect of whatever, fine, be transparent about it. But when you're not, I believe it's a bad look in general, right? You and I know what the reasoning behind it is, and it's not a knock on the league itself, but it's very easy to put it on there, right? And we do at some point need to start taking that into consideration.
I mean, how do you put a suspension on a player that's not showing up?
Well, he's
I,
back
I,
now, right? He's back now.
I
So
thought you said he was back and then he went MIA again.
no, he went MIA and then he came back.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay.
and that's what I'm saying. Like he came back and he's like, "Oh, well, I'm still trying to get back to 100%." So he might have been hurt, but he played 30 minutes against LA. So was he actually hurt? Is he using this as what is it? What's the thing? And again, the transparency part, we talked about it last week, where it would be a lot nicer for them to just come out and make a statement saying, "Hey, he's not going to be
No, yeah, I would agree with that. I still don't know if that's on the league or if that's on Minnesota in that case. I feel like more of the ball is in Minnesota's court as opposed to the league's court.
there." One is the extension of the other, right? Like if you're allowing your teams to do this, then you're allowing everybody to do it, right?
I don't think I don't know. Now I don't know what I think anymore.
I know I'm good at convincing people, but listen, end of the day, right? Like Lewis Morgan would never. Red Bull clear, like pretty easy to draw those conclusions, right?
Sure.
Um, but let's go to the obvious question: what's the next step here, right? The questions are being asked. Should Minnesota be done with him? Should they move on? They mentioned he's trying to get back to 100%, but similar to last year, they've started relatively well without him, right? Is it time to move on? Do you need him to be successful? Can you find somebody else to make it even more successful?
This is a tough question as well. Currently, I'm leaning toward yeah. I think you move on and try something new here because full season of Reynoso last season, Minnesota is in the playoffs. I have no doubts about that. They were like 3 points out of making the play-in game, and he played 1,400 minutes. Like, he played half a season. You give me a full season of Reynoso, that team is in the playoffs. No questions about it. And if you want to say like, oh, they had a hot start without him, imagine the same hot start, but he's in the lineup as well. Like, he's one of the best attacking players in the league. Adding that onto an already successful team is just going to make Mineesota even better. And we saw what Mineesota looked like when he was in the team. When he played over 2,000 minutes, they finished 11th and 12th in the Supporter Shield, which is, yeah, I'm not saying he's taken Mineesota to number one in the West and number one in the league, but it was certainly a far jump up from 21st finish they had last season when he played half the year. And if he's going to go down that route again, I 100% see Mineesota falling off of the good form and not being able to capitalize on having a player like Reynoso on the team. So at the moment, yes, I'm on board. I think they should move on, find someone who is going to be more committed to the team and can bring that same level of production, because I think Mineesota has the potential to be a consistent playoff team. They have a good core in place, and they need that star number 10 to help out Pookie. And if I were a Mineesota fan, I don't know if I'd be able to fully trust that Reynoso doesn't just leave again and do this again, because it's now been multiple times that it's happened.
Yeah, I'm right on board with you there, right? Still under contract for next year, so you're not going to lose him on a free until 2025, or if you want to use your buyout, like we were talking about before. Still only 28 years old, which is kind of wild. I thought he was well older than that. So plenty of sell-on value. I'm sure there are tons of club back in Argentina who will pay to bring him back, right? Even if you have to cut even or break a minimal loss, whatever it may be. And from there, now you take that money and you reinvest in players with similar skill sets who actually want to be there and grow their game, right? Don't get me wrong. He's been great for Mineesota. When he's on the field, he's one of the best there is in the league. There is no denying that. But you do have to be realistic with the model of the game in this league. You are under a cap. You have a certain amount of money to pay a certain amount of players. When you are under a cap, you are paying him to play. When he's doing stuff like this, you think that maybe there can be somebody there who can get you the production that he's given you in the times that he's played for a better bang for your buck. And that's just the way it may be. It's the harsh reality of sports being a business as much as it is, a game. It's even more emphasized by the fact that we're in a salary cap league. This isn't just somebody who's like, oh, we paid 25 mil to bring him in, and oh, he's not performing. Oh, well, we'll just sit him on the bench and play our 35 mil guy. Like, that's not the way this game works, not here. So in that mindset, can we move him on more proactively instead of waiting for him to get to the end of his contract and lose him on a free, right? Because that's what's going to end up happening. Because it's quite clear he doesn't want to resign unless something crazy happens and they pay him dumb money. But then again, you run the risk of him being like, oh man, I got paid and now I can show up whenever. So, yeah, I do think it is time to move on, not because he's underperforming or not even because of all the games he's missed, injury and otherwise, but you can probably find somebody who will get you the same output, equal or lesser cap hit, and wants to be there 100% of the time, grow that team. So I'm with you there.
Good. Glad we're on the same page.
All right, let's move into this last segment then. Really, I think we should start calling this episode series 2 news points and a talking point, because that's kind of what this ends up being. We talk about two things from the MLS news and then one thing from Twitter that kind of got a buzz and we start talking about it.
Is this the Twitter? Is this what you're insinuating?
Yes.
All right, what do we got?
We're transitioning now. So after Inter Miami was bounced from Champions Cup, there was a talking point that was brought up that general MLS fandom would never increase if we aren't successful in international competitions. It was mentioned in the tweet, and I think the phrasing was something along the lines of, why would anyone care about regular season games when they have no larger impact on their international importance? Something along those lines. I'm just going to throw it to you and let you run with it. Let me know what you're thinking on that.
I don't think enough fans care about CONCACAF Champions Cup, that if we're unsuccessful in there, that we're not going to grow, because we've grown year after year and we've won CONCACAF Champions Cup once in the last 20 years. So that comment means nothing to me. I mean, unless there's like statistics to back it up, and the fact that we're and if there's something that's showing that we could be 10 times more successful and popular than we are right now if we were winning Champions Cup, then I will take the comment more seriously. But I think they're just kind of blowing smoke on looking at whatever they can to hate on MLS, and that's just kind of what it feels like. It just feels like, oh, MLS is bad in CONCACAF Champions League, and they can't be a serious league unless they're winning CONCACAF Champions League every year. And people will only take it seriously and start being a fan once they start winning it. And I think you and I have talked about this enough times. If they start winning the CONCACAF Champions League consistently, it's just going to shift to the next reason. Oh, they're just playing CONCACAF teams. They need to test themselves against real competition outside of North America, and the bar will always shift. There will always be another reason why MLS is not popular or not more popular than it should be. And I don't think the average fan. Okay, so one, I don't think the average fan even knows what CONCACAF Champions League is. And two, I don't think they would care either way. I feel like a lot of fans are probably of the same, like, they're coming from the American sports background with like MLB, NBA, NFL, where there is no like Champions League type of competition. Like the regular season and the playoffs is all they watch. Like that's the only competition they have. So I'm thinking when they shift over and they become MLS fans or they start getting into MLS, that's all they're going to care about here too. They're not going to have any idea what's going on with Champions Cup and all that unless they were already a fan of, my guess would be a European team. Otherwise, I just don't think they know about Champions Cup. I don't think they care about Champions Cup. I think if we won it 5 straight years in a row, it maybe marginally increases our popularity, and the bar will just shift to a new way to say that MLS is dropping the ball.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of validity to it, but not as much as some of our other talking points, right? So I can understand, like you mentioned, it does have a little bit of an impact on those who those who know the game, right? Um, understand the impact of international competition, understand what it means to be the best in the region and all this stuff, right? Those people, I think, are either not following MLS to begin with, and if it increases, like you mentioned, it's oh, MLS is good in the region, I'm going to start watching it. That's not the case. It's oh, it's only CONCACAF. They wouldn't be able to touch it in Europe, right?
Yeah.
Whatever. The other thing is you do have that marginal kind of on the bubble where they're like, oh, I like MLS, but they're not competitive. That group is very, very small. Like the oh, it's MLS and they're holding themselves back with roster rules, which means they can't be competitive in X, Y, and Z. So whatever, right? I don't think that's actually a necessarily a bad take. Like that's probably true. We're hurting ourselves, and we've talked about that a little bit. We're hurting ourselves, and it's holding us back and whatever. But I don't think that those two are connected. Right, Grace? Do you think they're connected? She says no. I don't think they're connected, right? I think, and here's kind of the thing, right? We did an episode earlier in the year about intercontinental competitions or inter-country competitions, right? And their lack of attendance, right? The general fan that cares about their MLS team outside of very few markets, right? St. Louis was good, really has no idea that there's international competition outside of Leagues Cup anyway, because it's not put out there, right? He mentioned New England beat Charlotte, and it was a big win, right? It brought them up the first win of the season. And then Caleb Porter came out and was like, oh, there's, we're focused more on next week anyway. The Club America game is pretty much gone, for, paraphrasing. And he thinks that nobody in Boston will care about a team that isn't allowed to build a roster that can compete with Club America. That's basically was his thing. Like, oh, he's in Boston. They're all full of great super teams, Celtics, Red Sox, whatever. If New England isn't able to compete with Club America because they can't build rosters that can compete with Club America, the general fan won't be there. That's probably true, right? If there's a general soccer fan in there that is watching New England play with 3 designated players, a U22, and that's pretty much it, maybe they're more enticed to come in if they have a roster like Club America that's worth $40 million. Maybe that's probably a fair point. That being said, I don't think that the result against Club America is going to pull anything out. So, for reference, New England pulled 22,000 for their home match against Charlotte 4 days before Club America. They got 12K to play against one of the biggest teams in Mexico. And again, we've talked about why, right? We talked about that in other episodes. Do people get confused on soccer Twitter? Yes. I am one of them. Like you truly at times can lose focus on the disparity between the casual soccer fan and soccer Twitter. Two completely separate groups, right? Everyone online, including us here on this podcast, understands and loves this game with a passion. No doubt. We get the significance of the global level, the importance of the international games, the player transfers, all of it. We love how it interconnects, right? But generally, especially in America, your fan cares about the team they support on the weekends, right? International competitions like the CCC, even Leagues Cup, won't play it nearly as impactful of a part as the underperformance in the league, right? And you mentioned it before where their results in the league are going to be more of an impact, right? So nobody in Boston loves the Celtics, Red Sox, or I hate that I have to say this, the Patriots, because they're successful against the Japanese baseball league, the Euro basketball league, or the Australian football league, right? Nobody's walking around like, oh my God, we don't play those guys and we wouldn't, I'm not focused on that because we're not doing anything internationally. Their love or hatred for their team, go Jets, always stems from their success in the regular season against other teams that they know more of, right? Someone else made a good point in the comments where realistically, there are 12 teams in the world that have international dominance, right? City, TSG, Real Madrid, Barcelona. I can't name them all because, Euro, who cares, right? So the person asked, does that mean that the teams that don't have the domination in their local markets, should they just not have fans? Of course not, right? That's the whole point of this. They care more about what they're doing in their league than if they can compete with Man City every other week. Overall, I do think that this was just one of the heat of the moment takes, right? That nobody really agrees with, and that's fine, right? You have those. At the end of the day, I think he was calling for what most of us were calling for: more investment to compete and more investment to compete internationally, which is going to be great. It's going to increase competitive and eyes on the league. That's great. I just think he picked the wrong comparison, right? I think the fan support is going to be increased with spending and roster building that we've just covered in this episode. But I also think that it stems more from league success than international success.
Yeah, well, that's the way it's marketed. You're not, like MLS, individual teams, they're going to be marketing, their star players. They're going to be marketing the star players of the teams they're going up against. They're not marketing Guadalajara, the Chivas, Guadalajara. They're not marketing Club America. Like, so the fans are, you can go watch your team. Yeah, that's exciting, whatever. But I want to go watch the team play against Zach Steffen and Jordy Mihailovic, guys that I know would have been marketed to me, versus a team that I know nobody on. Like, I think the marketing is a huge reason why you'll see more people care about regular season performances than they will international. So yeah, I mean, I still stand by the fact that I think international success or failure is not going to swing the needle on popularity of the league.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And again, you brought up marketing and marketing teams, right? Why would MLS market a league that they're trying to compete against for eyes, right? Why would they make it
Yeah.
known? Now, again, those
Premier League's not like, look at, we're going up against Robert Lewandowski. Like let's market Lewandowski. Let's market, like Mbappe. Like
right. And because of the culture there, everybody knows who they are anyway. They don't need to. But here, when you're fighting for attention and you're fighting for it not only for the league below you, but also the leagues in your own backyard, there's no reason to try and get it. Focus on what you're doing first, and then it's a hurdle we don't need to tackle just yet, right? I think the moves that we've made and covered in this episode are going to be really, really good for us, and it's going to help increase competition in these international competitions. It's going to help us bring fans in with bigger signing players. It's all going to help encourage that, but I don't think our lack of international success, with the lack of importance that it has on the casual soccer fan anyway, is going to impact casuals watching the game.
Agreed. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, all right. Let's wrap this up. Thanks everybody for listening. We hope you really enjoyed it. We love talking about it. So thanks for being here and being a part of it. We have just hit 400 subs on YouTube and 600 on Twitter. We are hitting milestones each and every day. We appreciate all of you every single day for being here and being a part of what we do. And we love interacting with you and putting comments out there. So please continue to do that. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, iTunes, Google, wherever. Head over to our website or our link tree to find all of those links anyway. And then follow us on all forms of social media to see our clips and interact with us. So TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. So thanks again, everybody, for listening. We hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you on the next time of the next episode of the Designated Players, an MLS podcast. See ya.